we've reached the top of the hour, so we're now time to start on today's webinar, which is 7 ways to drive down repeat contacts. Very much looking at the topic of how to achieve first contact resolution, and also if you don't get a resolution on the first call, how we can drive down the contact rate so that people don't reach that sort of third, fourth, fifth, sixth time that they have to contact you to get a problem resolved. So I'm delighted to welcome back 2 speakers who've spoken before on our webinar program. Nick Drake-Knight from the NDK Group. Nick, welcome back.
Thanks, Shanti.
And I'm a great fan of Nick's writing. He's written a number of fascinating articles over time. My personal favourite is 5 phrases a contact centre manager should never use. And my favourite one in there is the word "but." I think you call that the butt monster, don't you?
Butt monster, yes. It's now a registered trademark, Johnsy.
So, which is all about, you give feedback. You did really well on that call, but, and then people ignore the whole first part of that, which is great. Also delighted to welcome back Rick McCrossan from Genesis. Welcome back to the call today, and you're dialing in from Belfast.
Yes, yeah, Jonty. Thanks for the welcome back, and welcome to everybody. Yep, I'm sunny Belfast today. Actually, the sun is shining for a change.
Wonderful. And you're going to be talking about the way that technology can help with reducing repeat contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot we know about our customers now, especially in this age of big data and everything's always on and connected. There's an awful lot that we know about what our customers are doing, and therefore, we can make some intelligent decisions in technology about how to treat them and how to give them a better experience.
Wonderful. Well, we've got a discussion going on today in our chat room, callcenterhelper.com/chat. There is a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip, and I'll be asking Nick if you'd pick the winning tip immediately after the webinar today.
I wanted to, yeah.
Which would be good, and we'll be announcing that on Twitter. So if you'd like to use hashtag tip for a tip, hashtag question for a question. You can download the webinar slides at this link in the chat room, just here, and here's the address to log in. You'll have to put that on a separate window from the screen. It's not integrated currently, though we are looking to change that for next year. If you want to watch the replay of today, that's going to be at callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars, and that will be from about 3 o'clock this afternoon. Before we dive into Nick's presentation, just want to ask a poll question of the audience, and that is, how do you measure repeat contacts in your organization? Do you measure repeat contacts through no repeat contacts in a given time frame, possibly collected off the telephone number that people have used? Do you ask the customer? Do you use a post-call survey? Do you have repeat reason codes in your CRM system, or do you not measure repeat contacts? So if you'd just like to vote on the answers there, Rick, what do you think is likely to be the most common answer there?
I would actually think that counting the number of calls from individual phone numbers is probably going to feature quite highly.
Yeah, I would have expect that as well. Well, let's have a look at the ways that people are measuring it, and let's share the answers there. So, looks like the highest one is actually a call reason code in the CRM system. 32% of the audience are not measuring repeat contacts. 11% are doing contacts within a given time. 13% have a post-call survey, and only 3% ask the customer. Which certainly asking the customer is one that I was on a couple of calls recently where the agent was trying to convince me that my problem was resolved because it had been logged on the system. And I said, no, it hasn't been resolved. It might be in a week's time when the engineer comes to site, but until that moment, it's not resolved. And I guess he was bonused on driving that down, so that'd be quite interesting.
Yeah.
And we've had a comment in from Rosie who says what's driving repeat contacts in her organisation, having too many IVR options and agents only knowing part of the information. Okay, so that's interesting. I want to just drill down onto another question in our chat room, which is, do you measure repeat contacts across all channels? So is it just done from the telephone channel? Can you measure that over web chat? Can you do it through email? Can you measure if someone emails in and then phones, if that's a repeat contact? And also, do you find that you can measure when someone's been on your website and then phones you? Is that the first or second approach? So if you'd like to type into the chat room, do you measure repeat contacts across all channels? So I'd just like to type that in. Helen says, yes, we do. Dennis says we do, as does Dee. So we've got a range of people also typing in. So Julia says, no, they don't. Tim says, we don't, but we should. Sebastian says, yes. Kirsten says, we can do it across 2 channels. We can do it across email and telephone, but we can't really do it across the web. Rosie says, yes. Sean says, not yet. We're implementing a CRM solution in 2016, which should help that. Naomi says we can do it for just phone and email, and Evie says we can do it across all channels. So Rick, that seems quite a variance there on how people can measure repeat contacts across different channels.
Yeah, I'm not overly surprised there with some of those answers. And certainly, in my experience, some of the ways that people have to measure this is actually almost by surveys and interviewing customers to find out. And I think Nick, you mentioned this earlier on, but yeah, the typical metric is somewhere in the region of about 5 contacts is where customers start to get unhappy and experience drops. And actually, I don't think we're going to talk about social media, but social people involved in social customer care quite often are the ones that find out that customers have made maybe 4, 5, 6 contacts to the business before going to social in the hope of getting an answer.
Yeah, so absolutely fascinating on that. And I guess it's quite difficult to tie the web piece in, because if someone's on the website and then they come to you, is that a first contact? So because that can be quite difficult to track. Okay, well, I think it's probably at the time now where we'll start to add some meat into the sandwich now, and pass the baton across to Nick Drake-Knight from the NDK group. And Nick, if you'd like to put your slides up on the screen and share your thoughts on how to reduce repeat contacts.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
We can indeed, yes.
All right. Okay, well, thanks, Jonty, and thanks everybody for joining us today. My presentation is called Understanding Caller Mindsets, and I really want to explore with you the importance, the significance of getting inside the mind, inside the head and the heart of your callers. Because it seems to me that Rick's going to do a great piece in a moment about some of the technological opportunities that are available to us. It seems to me that alongside that we can do some really good work in exploring the mindset of folk who are making that call. There's a reason, ladies and gentlemen, why people make the call, and I think sometimes we forget the significance of finding out and understanding what I call the emotional driver. So let's explore this a little bit. I'm going to suggest to you today that the more that we can get inside the mind, inside the head and the heart of callers, the more likely it is that we're going to be able to resolve their requirements, and along the way, of course, reduce repeated contacts into your centre. Alongside that, of course, is offering a phenomenal customer experience to your callers. So that's the emphasis of my 3 ways that I'm going to introduce to you about driving down repeat contacts. So here are the 3 ways. I'm suggesting the first one is that understanding. I'm going to explore something around feeling, what I call movement away and movement towards. We'll explore that in a moment. adding value, doing something other than processing or creating some form of transaction with that human who's contacted you, and relating that back to that inner feeling which they have and which we all have when we make that initial contact into the call center. And finally, something which I guess many of us are familiar with through customer effort score and some of that work around making it easy, minimizing effort, and so far as we can, resolving first time, at least finding out what's going on inside the mind of that customer. So let's explore these in a little bit more detail. Here we go. What we want: Patterns of Customer Desire. This is the title of a book that's due out. A fabulous book, by the way. Due out early in 2016. And there you go. There's me in the top right, tapping away on the keyboard. And the three components are those which I've just described. What do customers want? What do callers want? There are patterns which are common threads for all interactions with service providers. And customers want these three things, and this is what I propose in the book, and you can read about that in due course. The first is, will you please understand me? Me, not the process, not the product, not the service, not the topic, not the issue. Me, what's going on inside my world. And secondly, once you've got an understanding of what's driving me to make the call, can you do something other than process me? Can you recognize that I'm a human being and I have all sorts of emotions going on inside me, which I'd like you to acknowledge, recognize, and help me to rationalize? And finally, can you make the whole thing as simple as possible, please, and make it quick and easy? Convenience, of course, these days is ever more important. Okay, so let's have a look at the first of these areas of interest, understand me. What I propose, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is a reason for the call. It's a deep reason. It's an emotional reason. And that reason is typically driven by one of two, what I call emotional drivers. And those emotional drivers, ladies and gentlemen, are feelings. They're very strong feelings. And they can be positive, movement towards feelings, or more painful, anxiety driving, negative feelings, what I call movement away feelings. Here they are. Two personal motivators. And if you think about it, folks, every single piece of human behavior is driven by one of these things. Every single thing that we do, every piece of behavior, every action that we take is driven by either an urge to remove ourselves from discomfort or pain or fear of future discomfort, or an urge towards pleasure and feeling comfortable. Every single piece of behavior is driven by one or both of those emotional drivers. And if you consider the reasoning behind your caller's motivation, it will be one or both of those emotional drivers. Let's have a look at these. So here we go. Here's movement away from pain or discomfort. There's the cartoon with people avoiding the dentist. I suspect some folk have experienced that. We take action to stay away from pain or discomfort, and that translates itself into making a call into a contact center. Maybe here's a typical one. Energy prices are going up. Maybe the internal motivator, the emotional driver, is one around discomfort. I do not want to be paying more than I absolutely have to for my electricity and gas. Therefore, I'm going to make a call into my existing supplier or potentially a new one. Activity driven by an urge to move away from discomfort. What about movement towards comfort then, or movement towards pleasure? What kind of things go on inside the heads and hearts, the minds of callers in terms of comfort or pleasure? Well, here's an obvious one, I guess. I suspect that we've all been driven to make contact with an organisation, perhaps for a lovely holiday, and we are excited by the potential of those feelings that we're going to have, feelings of comfort, feelings of pleasure, of the sunny beach there by the sea. So it's a truism, ladies and gentlemen, that every single thing that we do, every single piece of behaviour is driven by one of those two levers, movement away or movement towards. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could find out what's going on in the heads and hearts of our callers Is it an urge to move away or an urge to move towards? So, here's a question for you. I'm going to give you a few seconds to input something into the chat room. My question for you is, what would you say are the typical emotional drivers that your callers have when they make contact with your agents? Is it a movement away, urge, or is it a driver of movement towards? And what are those movement aways and movement towards? So I'll give you a few seconds to make a note of that. And it's fabulous research, isn't it? Wonderful research to find out from all you folk out in the field, the kind of things that drive people to make those calls.
So we've got a few of the answers coming in now. Evie says it's a matter of urge. Lindsay says it's moving away. Kim says it's moving away. Stephen says it's moving away. It's cost that's doing it. Rosie says it's moving away from paying fees and trouble using the website drive it. Dave says one of the big drivers that they find is it's caused by anxiety. People are anxious, so they phone the contact centre. That's quite an interesting one. Sebastian says there's an urge if they haven't got their newspaper or magazine, so they cut the contact in to find a way there. Sean says it's problems using equipment, so that's very definitely moving away. As does Danny, who says it's also moving away. Service complaints and travel disruption, which I guess can be immensely frustrating for people trying to get home. Farah says it's customers who can't track the order online on the website. Dave says his perspective comes from the public sector because there's no competitor there, so I guess that's a different one. Naomi says there's a sort of an urge there, which is issues with accessing someone's account. And Julia also says movement away from discomfort, usually driven by no policy or process. It's not about them, the customer. So
well, how about that?
Fascinating ones there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, interesting. The majority of those responses, if not all of them, were about movement away from. John, you talked about the word anxiety, which clearly is an emotional driver.
Yeah.
If we really want to help customers, if we want to really get inside their world, then understanding those anxieties, those emotions, those things that are stimulating the call, we're much more likely to be able to reduce repeated contacts by understanding the individual. And I feel passionately about that. Hey, let's have a look, shall we? So, look, is it a movement towards the call? Is it something that they'd really like to have? Is it something they want to move away from? Well, we can find out by gentle questions, of course, and having a conversation and batting questions and answers across the telephone line. But how can we do that? Well, I'm just going to introduce a very simple, it's just one, it's a very simple strategy which some of you will be familiar with and maybe some of you it will be new. And it's about what I call rapid rapport or fast friendship. There's a person who's hit the roof, look. Just bear with me while I put you on hold. How can we get inside their world? Look, here's something that is well proven. Clean language, and sometimes referred to as mirroring language. Clean language is a wonderful strategy for building that rapid rapport, that fast friendship. It's about using the caller's own words and phrases. And maybe we can clarify meaning. People use emotive language when they're anxious or when they're excited. And one of the things that we can do is use that caller's words and phrases, their language, and maybe ask some questions about what specifically they're referring to and in the use of those particular words. And we can begin the process of enhancing the caller's feeling of being really understood. It's a very simple approach. What we do is simply reflect back their words and sometimes ask questions to get clarity of meaning. Here's a very simple one. Look, here's somebody on the TV hunt. I'd like to include some culture channels in my TV package. You want to do that? And the agent responds, well, yes, we can do that. What type of culture channels are you interested in specifically? It's a very simple technique. The danger of paraphrasing, that's to say to use phrases and words that are similar but not the same as the customers, is that the caller can often perceive that they are not being properly listened to. So it's a very simple technique, and you can incorporate it into your basic induction training or refresher training to ensure that agents use exactly the same words and phrases as customers to enhance that feeling of being understood. Let's have a look at another example. This is about cultural visits into a holiday. Very simple, a very simplistic secondary example. Like if your cultural visits into a holiday, you can arrange it. Yeah, I'm sure we can arrange it. What sort of cultural visits do you think of? Just using the same language. Okay. So we've started the process of understanding the customer, get inside their world, understanding those emotional drivers, starting to use the same language as them, building that trust, building that friendship, building that rapport, and we can do it really, really quickly. Next up in what I call patterns of customer desire is this adding value, and this is the second step that I'd like to suggest is significant and important. Because we're all fed up, frankly, being processed, aren't we? You do something other than process me. I'm not a transaction. I'm a person. I've got all sorts of things going on inside me, and I'd like to be understood, not just to be treated as another task. Here's one that bugged me recently. I shan't mention the name of the company, but it was an insurance issue, and ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you I was processed, and I was so angry. I tweeted it. Such was my frustration. I've just been processed by this particular organisation. The agent spoke as quickly as it is humanly possible to do, and there was little or no empathy. I was clearly another task to be ticked off the list. There was no added value for me. The activity was completed, but I didn't feel loved. And that's not acceptable, for me as a customer at least. Here's the response though. Fair play to this organisation. I thought that the response was pretty good. They recognised that efficiency and clarity is a difficult balance. And they were willing to hand that back onto the staff. So there was no criticism of the efficiency. The process was superb. I received the information and the outcome I required, but I didn't feel as though I was being understood or loved. Well, maybe I might want to come back and question future transactions with that organisation in a slightly different way. I'm a person, not a process component. And here's the rationale behind that, I guess, is linking back the service that we offer to callers to that emotional driver that I described earlier on. So why is it that they've called? What is that initiative, that leverage? What is it that's caused them to make the call? And the quote there, part of adding value is helping people reconnect with some emotional side of their lives. That's what we mean when we talk about adding value. It doesn't have to be a tangible product or additional item of service. Just make them feel as though they're being understood.
And I think, actually understanding why customers call is one that we so often presume that we know that. And a lot of the research I've done, and I hosted a meeting on Tuesday looking at this, and I think the consensus view is that we presume we know what our customers are looking for. But that's a sort of dangerous assumption to make.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's because we don't get inside their world, Jonty. We as you say, we make assumptions. We presume that we know what the requirement is. We forget to explore and share some of those inner thoughts and emotions that the caller has. A real world-class customer service is when we understand people, and I think that many of us could do better at getting that level of empathy with callers, and that will inevitably reduce repeat contacts. It's a no-brainer. Okay, let's have a look at the third step. I've talked about make it easy. There's lots of information around now, of course, and the work from Harvard and Customer Effort Score and BT.NET Easy that I guess we're all familiar with now. This really is an essential element, isn't it? And the smart cartoon there, of course, is celebrating the fact that the guy's not being kept on hold and he's not having to listen to the 4 seasons of Vivaldi again for minutes after minute. So what can we do to make that whole thing as simple as possible and as quick as possible? And we know from the research, don't we, that the Harvard work, in fact, I think it was 3 times, once the repeat contact was reached 3, that the effort score was doubled. And I'll give you the reference a little bit in a few moments' time if you want to research that. But my recollection is on the 3rd contact, effort, perception of effort is doubled. And clearly that's not something that we want our customers to experience. Here we go. So it was from Dixon, Freeman and Thoman. If you're interested in the detail of it, you can have a look at HBR. If you're Twitter fans, follow HBR and you'll get, I guess I used to get about 8 or 9 articles a day, some of which are relevant, some less so. But you can certainly get an overview of that piece from HBR. Highest returns can be found by focusing on areas where customers expect things to be easy but are finding them hard. So in terms of reducing those repeat contacts, making it easy is a key element, I believe. I think that it reduces effort, I think it reduces loyalty, certainly that research tells us that. And importantly, in terms of business development, the advocacy side of things is something that I think we shouldn't underestimate. Very important. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, Rick's going to do a great piece in a moment on some of the process issues and the technological aspects. So my understanding for me about these things here. So can we reduce the process elements? And some of you, I guess, will be familiar with value stream mapping. Some of you less so. Just for those who are not quite so clear, there's a difference between customer journey mapping and value stream mapping. Customer journey mapping is clearly from the customer's perspective. Value stream mapping involves all of the inputs and all of the process elements within the organisation, which maybe are not so obvious to the customer. Map out the entire value stream, and sometimes what we can do is identify tasks or activities that are not adding value, they're just adding time or resource and inevitably cost. So that's something you might want to have a look at. And the part in bold there is, can you get rid of some of the buttons that people have to press, please? I'm sure Rick will comment on that. The perception of effort is something I think that we can do a lot more on. In my work, I work a lot with is around pre-framing, and a pre-frame is where we help individuals understand what is about to happen, what's to come. And I know some contact centres are very good at providing a pre-frame for customers. Sometimes it's agent-led rather than organisationally led, helping the caller to understand what's going to happen over the next few minutes. It's a wonderful thing to do. It provides a frame of expectation and reduces the perception of effort. Clearly, we want to resolve it first time, don't we? Of course we do. A combination of process, which again, Rick's got some great stuff for you in a moment, and that agent mindset. And I guess my area of interest is much more around the psychological and emotional element of what we can do in contact centres. And can we take the information just once, please? Again, Rick's going to do a great piece on this in a moment. Please don't ask me to input the same information time and time again into the same organisation. It's hugely frustrating, and it's not helping. There's a great document via Call Centre Helper, the step-by-step guide to using customer journeys in contact centres. I recommend that you take a moment to explore that. There's some really good tips in there. Well done, Jonty, for getting that onto your site. So, driving down repeat contacts, my view is that we can do an awful lot to make those reductions through understanding what's going on inside the world of the cooler. And I think it comes in three formats. The first is to understand the feeling, the movement towards. What is it that's going on? What's the leverage for the call, the emotional driver? Can we do something that helps the caller feel as though their feeling has been acknowledged and is being supported, resolved maybe? And finally, can we make the whole thing as simple as possible, please, and minimise that effort? If we can do those three things, then I think the likelihood of repeat contacts will reduce. Combine that with the great stuff that Rick's going to share with us in a moment, and we can make a difference. So there we go, that's me, that's one of my books. There's a few out there and a couple more coming in the early part of next year. If any of you want to contact me by email or give me a tweet or give me a call or old-fashioned telephone, it's always nice. Please do so. Always happy to chat, and I wish you good luck in reducing repeat contacts.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Nick, and certainly when you publish your new book, which is that called Patterns of Customer Desire, the book?
It's called What We Want, Patterns of Customer Desire.
Wonderful. When you publish that, we'd be delighted to pull you back into another webinar, and you can share some of the new research that you would have developed for that, so which would be great. So that's absolutely great. Now we're going to drive down on a comment that Nick made, and that we're going to look now and ask a question of you, which is how many people have been involved in value stream mapping in your organization? So have you done any value stream mapping? If you'd like to type that into the chat room. It'd be also interesting if anyone's done any customer journey mapping, and if you found anything from it. So Helen says yes, she's done some value stream mapping. Steve has said no, but is interested in finding out more. Is it very difficult to do, Nick?
No, not at all. No, in fact, I'm certainly no expert, but I've used it in lots of different organisations very successfully, and critically transferred that technology to the organisations themselves, so that they can create that sort of internal sustainability piece. It's not a difficult thing to do at all, and like most process tools, you can do it a complex way, or you can use it in a very simple way, and my guidance to you is use it the simple way.
Wonderful. Dave says they've done both value stream mapping and customer journey mapping, and they've worked out it costs £3.83 a transaction via the telephone channel.
Wow.
Julia also has done value stream mapping and uses surveys to listen to the voice of a customer, of way of getting that. And Iwan has said we have a customer journey manager, but no value stream mapping at the moment. So it sounds like that's an area to look at. Naomi has said we've done extensive mapping and redesigned some of our web journeys as a result. So I think that's a very very positive one from that perspective. So Nick, does that surprise you how few people have done this?
No, not really, because I think customer journey mapping makes sense initially. Of course, we want to see things from the customer's perspective, but sometimes I think we can get systems clogged up by overcomplicating our own internal processes, and value stream mapping is a great way to identify where there's excessive task, excessive activity, which inevitably impacts on the customer, and if we can cut out some of those non-value adding activities, there's almost always a benefit for the end user customer. So, I'd encourage people to look beyond journey mapping and look at VSM, because there is some useful tools that can be used not just once but repeatedly, and critically by the people at the sharp end. Robert Townsend, he wrote up the organisation all those years ago. What did he say? He said, "Ask the people; they know where the wheels are squeaking." And I'm a great fan of that. I think value stream mapping is a lovely way to get the agents involved in process analysis.
Yeah, well, we've never had an article on that, so I think that's something we'll be adding to our Forward Futures list of articles that we'll be writing out, the value stream mapping. Let's have a look at the chat room, see what comments have been coming in from the floor. Victoria said, we're going to measure repeat contacts on web chat, but it's hard because the possibility of entering chat with different names every time. So I guess that's a problem of an identifier. Glenn has said it's. I think it's tied into your contact, Rick. It's important to define what you mean by a contact. Different environments class contacts differently.
Yeah, great point. That's one of the points I'm going to come on to in my presentation in a moment.
Okay, excellent. Nikki said, ensure that agents are actually resolving the issue, not just seeing them as transactions. I guess this ties into your point, Nick. And encourage first contact resolution and particularly ownership of the issues. Nick, I often feel that the customer tends to be the person that owns the problem, which seems a bit the wrong way around.
Yeah. I've worked with one contact centre north of the border some years ago, and they were superb at encouraging their agents to take ownership. And it really does make a difference when somebody at the supplier end feels as though that it's their issue as much as it is the customer. So I'm a huge fan of that. I really like that tip from Nikki.
Yeah, Dave says use customer sentiments via a survey to sway senior managers in order to invest in a good CRM system. I guess Dave there is a fan of CRM. Nikki also says understand the reasoning for repeat contacts by logging call query types and also promoting education so that the callers are informed and have the information to self-serve next time. We certainly talked about understanding why callers are calling, and that could be, as I often say, it's as simple as inviting 5 of your team leaders out for a lunch for an hour. That will give you some good insight to what's happening, right the way through to the other end of the scale. Analytics software would certainly help you do that. Tim has said right channeling, get the customer to the right department is important in contact resolution. I guess, Nick, there's also a modern trend towards multi-skilling, so that the first advisor you speak to is trained on a whole range of different issues.
Yeah, it's a great idea. There's it's not always as easy to implement as the principle, but if it can be done, it makes a lot of sense.
And looks like Dave's come back on his comment with the CRM system. We have access to information in an instance via the web. Customers want to know immediately because that's what we've become accustomed to. So I guess we're getting used to a much quicker environment. Providing the customer with the ability to track a request and keep them updated is what our customers want. Hence the investment in a CRM system that empowers the customer. I certainly like that. If you can, as a customer, dial in and see the progress of your fault moving through the system, that removes the need to, well, sometimes removes the need to contact if it's moving forward, I guess. So it could be quite a nice use of technology there, Rick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's keeping the customer informed the whole way through the process, and yet we're so used to being able to get access to information so easily these days that, we gotta meet those expectations.
Yeah, we've got.
Sorry, if I just comment on that. What's interesting there is, of course, each time the customer tracks a request, I guess you could argue that that's a repeat contact. The difference here being, of course, that it's a repeat contact that doesn't involve resource investment.
Yeah.
And so the customer can contact as many times as they like. It's not actually incurring any resource cost.
Yeah. And I guess it's wanted versus unwanted. If the customer wants to find out what's happening, they can do that. The customer is in control. So I guess it's not sort of moving away from pain. Whereas if you're having to chase someone up, that is sort of emotionally much harder to deal with. Okay, let's have a look at the last tip in this section. And Unya says, train your agents above and beyond to achieve customer satisfaction. Train agents to provide not only dry answers to customers questions. I guess if there's dry answers, then that may be a lack of emotion there. But also to train how to ask open questions, how to think 2 steps further and provide more information, which could be useful for a customer later. Nick, that sounds like a sort of summary of a number of your books over the year.
Yes, thinking 2 steps further. I reckon it sounds like a chess strategy, doesn't it?
It does. So, some wonderful ideas overall there. Well, we're going to jump across now. We're going to have a look at a quick poll, and we're going to ask the question. Nick talked about putting callers on hold, and just want to ask you the question of: do you measure how long you put your callers on hold? So we just put this question up. So do you measure how long you put callers on hold for? And the answer is yes, no, or are you not sure? So we'd just like to put the answers in there. Rick, do you think it's we've got a lot of measurement obsessed people in contact centres? Do you think this is a factor that a lot of people measure?
I would imagine that this one's going to be probably measured quite a lot, actually. Yeah. The question is what do you do with that data when you measure it? There you go.
Well, here we are. 57% say yes. Surprisingly, for a measurement environment, 37% say no. And I would have thought putting callers on hold, Nick, is a sign of something that's wrong in the organisation. Whether you've got to just get the system logged into the different systems, or whether you don't know the answer yourself, so you've got to go off and find someone to get the answer.
Yeah, it sounds like a process or a resourcing issue, doesn't it? So it's a concern. I agree with Rick. How long is a great question. I think some of the questioning beyond that is the bit that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, so we'd be fascinated to see if you do measure it, what do you do with it? If you could type the answer into the chat room, and we'll put that up in a little bit. So I think now we're going to jump across to Rick McCrossan from Genesys, who's going to give some perspectives and plenty of reflective view on how technology can improve first contact resolution, and perhaps look back at where we've come from on this journey before. So, Rick, without spoiling your thunder, if you'd like to take us through your thoughts.
Yeah, hopefully you can see my slide there, Jonty.
We can. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at this stage, people probably can't have escaped this one, that yesterday was a very important day. It was Back to the Future Day, the day that Marty McFly and Doc Brown travel to in Back to the Future Part 2. I've been using this illustration all year, and yesterday was the day that it finally happened. And I think it's a bit of an interesting reflection on what people in 1989 thought that 2015 was going to be like. See some of the examples here. They thought for some reason that the future of personal communication was going to be fax machines. I don't know about you guys. I don't have any fax machines in the house, let alone the 5 or 6 that Marty McFly has. Interestingly, there's a few things that they did get right. Wearable technology and drones and things like that. But the reason I bring this up is to reflect on, well, what is 2015 really like? And a few of the comments have already reflected on. It's all about connectivity now, and we're so well connected to each other. Everybody's probably got a smartphone. In fact, some of you are probably watching this webinar on your smartphone today. And there are just so many ways now that we can contact each other. But crucially for this topic today, how we can contact our bank, our telecommunication provider, our retailer. There's just so many different ways and different types of contacts. Some of the tips earlier on referred to this as well. So that's why I want to kind of broaden the whole topic out a little bit to think more about those, this might be a little bit of a buzzword, but these omni-channel journeys that our customers are on, and how to deal with just the sheer volume of contacts that we have now. there's an image on the screen there. If there's any of you from Northern Ireland, you will recognise this. This is the Peace Wall, ironically named, in Belfast. It's designed to keep the Protestant and Catholic communities separate, but the reality is people live in the same city, they work in the same buildings, they shop in the same shopping centres. And I think in many ways, often that's how our companies are organised. We have a great web team over here that the customer interacts with. We have a contact centre team over here that the customer interacts with. The customer's going back and forth between the two, but our teams are not sharing and coordinating that information. And you know, I think Nick maybe hinted to this earlier on, but we've got Dory the fish, famous from Finding Nemo, famous for forgetting everything that she's told. And we do that to our customers all of the time. You know, they tell us something on the phone and we ask them again on email. They tell us something on social media and we ask them again by chat. We're just forcing them to repeat themselves all of the time. And in this connected world, it just becomes more and more of a problem, and it just causes broken journeys that lead to more contacts and more difficulty than customers deserve. So building on the 3 points that Nick introduced at the start of the call, I guess I really like this understand me tip that Nick introduced, and I want to build on that primarily by talking about how we can be journey aware, it's so important to understand what our customers are doing, what is their context, what have they done recently with us, what are they doing now, to be able to make a decision about how to treat them. And there's things that we can tell. We talked about drop calls earlier. Early life example. These are actually good repeat contacts because customers are in the early part of their service and journey with you, make more contacts, but they're also a higher churn risk in some cases. So recognizing that fact and treating them appropriately is key to maximizing the value of those repeat contacts. Way number 5 is be proactive. There's a bit of a retail example here of abandoned shopping carts, but this is just as vital in the service environment as in the sales environment. Answer questions before they are asked. A good example of this is if you go to Marks and Spencer and try and hunt around on their website for maybe a dress that you saw, or to use a gift card that you got for Christmas. It's quite often you might get a little pop-up and offer some extra assistance from somebody in Marks and Spencer to help you out, because they realise that the value of that proactive engagement, reaching out to that customer and offering assistance of that before it's asked, helps reduce those repeat contacts and helps make it easier for the customer. I think this is an important one that often sometimes we don't think about. It's actually keeping your promises and the importance of that. And you know, our marketing departments do a great job of setting the brand promise and so on. But then, you know, the people that often are responsible for keeping that brand promise and ensuring that it's met, quite often we neglect to really look at the value and importance of that part in the journey. And you know, this is in some ways I want to call out what we've mentioned a few times about CRM systems. You know, the best CRM system in the world can define your business rules and your prioritization, your process flow. But when it comes to those people that actually have to undertake those tasks and carry out those tasks at the right time, that's often where the keeping promises can often fall down. And so we need to avoid and help our staff avoid cherry picking and picking something that looks easy, and they should be picking the task, or they should be given the task that is the right thing for them to do at that moment in time. So you know, keeping your promises is so important, and again, avoiding those additional contacts. And the last one I wanted to reflect on, and this is I brought this last, it's maybe a little bit more innovative, but this is the idea of multimodality. And you know, we're multimodal customers now. What do I mean by that? Well, it's multi-screening, multi-device, you know, whatever term you're comfortable with. The same research that Nick mentioned earlier on from the Harvard Business Review on customer effort found that more than half of calls into contact centers started online, and a third of them are still there. So we've got this image now, and I'm sure we've all done it, where you're probably on the phone waiting to speak to somebody. You've already sent a tweet, you've sent an email, and you're on the website chatting to the agent at the same time. It's likely that you're maybe talking to different parts of the business in that as well. So we're recognizing that customers are multimodal, they're multi-screening, and bringing all those interactions together so that one member of staff can respond. So let me give you an example of what that might look like. Here's Michael, my customer, and he's at his laptop. He's logged into his bank, GBank, so he's logged into the website, and he's trying to find out something about ordering a credit card, but he can't find it. So he picks up the phone and calls GBank. Now he's a multimodal customer. He's online and he's on the phone at the same time, and we recognize that. We recognize that fact. And on the bottom right of the screen, you can now see that we're actually able to give him visual options and visual hints about how he can be served. So we've recognized the fact that he's multi-screening with us, and help avoid those additional unnecessary repeat contacts by serving him in the right way at that moment of need. I just wanted to reflect on a bit of research that we carried out at a customer of ours last year, building on some of the comments that have been made about keeping customers on hold and call transfers and things like that, and the link that has to customer satisfaction and net promoter score. There's some complex data on the screen here, but really to call out on the top left in the red diagram, excuse me, customers, we measured customers who weren't transferred, and they were always answered by one person, no transfers. And you can see that some of these calls went up to 10 minutes in length, but it didn't really see a drop off in net promoter score. Now you then look at the right hand side of the screen where we've got customers that were transferred 1, 2 or more times, and look at the impact that it had on the net promoter score. It took a serious dive when we started to bring more transfers into that, really illustrating the impact that unnecessary repeat contacts and first call resolution has on the response.
That's quite significant. Those the difference in net promoter score there is going from being on the left hand side to being a keen advocate to I think being a sort of a detractor on the right hand side. With just simply transferring the call.
Yeah, it's incredible. Nick mentioned this earlier on about repeating yourself, and every time that they have to transfer themselves, they have to, and they rebuild rapport with the new person they're speaking to, repeat information. Yeah, it's not a great experience, and what really strikes me, as you say, Jonty, 8.8 net promoter score, even when people have been waiting for 10 minutes. As long as they get answered and dealt with first time. Excuse me. So, just really to suppose bring my piece to a close here. Some of the tools that we can now provide for what we are calling journey managers. So, agents that can now see real time the journey that our customer has been on up to that point, and we can now measure, repeat how many contacts on average this customer has had to make with us to solve their queries. On the right hand side, what your supervisors and contact center managers might get to see what types of journeys are driving repeat contacts, so they can make appropriate changes in their business. And ultimately, we're trying to move away from this, so many contacts involved in a journey, to something that is easy. To Nick's point from earlier on, is to remove those unnecessary contacts, be more proactive, recognize where our customers are on their journey, and create a positive and easy experience for our customers. There you go. So there's 7 ways to drive down repeat contacts.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed for that, Rick. And I think certainly there's some quite interesting thoughts in there. Certainly the keeping promises is an important one, because I think that's where often contact centers often struggle, particularly if you've got broken processes in the organization. But I guess one of the other challenges with that is also setting expectations, as people use service level, saying no, we will resolve the problem within 3 days. Well, that's a target. That's not necessarily that it will be resolved. And so I think people then have in their head it will be resolved within 3 days and get upset when it isn't. So I think it's just that what should happen and what could happen in terms of some of the language of people. people use.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, but just look at in your own personal life, and when people make promises and so on, set expectations with you. You know, somebody says they're going to do something in a week, you expect it to happen in a week, and it's just right. If it's not going to take a week, it's going to take longer. That it's just a matter of out of respect that you'll tell them that, look, I'm having trouble making this in a week.
Indeed, and I think there's also some very important lessons to be learned there about. Certainly when it comes to the multi-modality security as you go from one channel to another. I think we do tend to, we're calling from, say, a mobile phone, which, it's got quite good identity now. Most people have a number relating to them, and yet we use the same security if they're calling from a mobile phone as if they were calling with no telephone number traveling at all. And, I think, for instance, Rick, I know you've talked before about sometimes repeat contacts can just be due to the mobile phone signal dropping. The call drops out as if you're driving along the motorway or on a train line, and then you have to come back in, and you have to re-identify yourself every time that happens, which can be very frustrating for the caller. Right, we're going to have a look at the chat room now. Have a look at some of the tips and questions that are coming through. Very nice one here from Rose says, we do not have a target on call times about how long they should be. The call takes as long as it takes, as long as there is value to the call. Nick, I guess that ties very, very nicely into building rapport.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a wonderful thing if you can do it, and there's a lot of pressure on contact centres now, isn't there, to be as efficient as possible. It's a wonderful thing if you can take Rosie's suggestion and implement it.
Yeah, I think it's a very good one. I think we tend to treat call centres as factories of calls or factories of contact, and sometimes we can confuse efficiency with effectiveness. Rosie said, work with agents on how they can get to the point quicker, but don't penalise them for taking longer if it was necessary. So I think that's quite an interesting bit of insight. Nikki says, I think it's perfectly acceptable to put a customer on hold, but ensuring it's only for a few minutes. Any longer, we should be advising we should have a callback. If it means first contact resolution, then in my opinion, putting the customer on hold is fine, certainly if you've got to perhaps speak to another department. I personally don't have an issue being put on hold when calling someone. And I guess it's, what is the reason for the put on hold? Sometimes I say it's just, I've got to log into another telephone system, so I'll put someone on hold. If it's to speak to someone else, that's different. Nick, your take?
This ties in for me with the pre-frame we were talking about earlier. Do you remember? If we can pre-frame the customer to explain what's going to happen during that period of being on hold, the fact that the agent is going to take personal responsibility for this, is going to make some inquiries, and they're going to get back to the customer as quickly as they possibly can. That seems to me to be a really useful pre-frame, rather than I'm just going to put you on hold for a moment. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Glendon says, compared to this time last year, we're acquiring 5% less landline numbers in our system. We average 4 more attempts to contact a mobile than a landline. As landline phase out, the contact strategy will need to evolve in line with smartphones. Text messages, instant messaging, social networking, voicemail, really going to change. And Rick, we've talked before about, that people are having more mobile phones, and one thing I've said is that, from a inbound perspective, we can actually more identify the individual than, for instance, if there was a landline with 4 people living on the place. Do you think contact's going to transform as there are more and more mobile phones out?
I think it is. I think just look at the amount of data and context that you can get from the device itself as you're making a contact, and more and more now that contact, even a voice contact, is not necessarily a PSTN voice call. It could be a Skype call or a Viber call or something like that, and that allows us to move a lot more data and information around to make the agent's life a lot easier because they've got more information to go on.
Indeed. And a final tip from Rosie, who says, manage expectations. People tend to get frustrated if they're promised something that doesn't happen, no matter how big or how small. I guess, Nick, that really is one of the key learnings.
But yeah, I mean, let's get back to what we were talking about earlier on, which is get inside the world of that person. It's an emotional driver that's causing them to make a call. Now, people tend to get frustrated. What's that? It's an internal emotion, and we sometimes have the ability to impact on that. I think recognising the potential frustrations that lie in a customer journey is a smart thing to do.
Well, we've almost reached the top of the hour, so if you could type into the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? If you could enter that into the chat room. There is a replay available later on this afternoon, be available in about an hour's time. That's at callcenterhelp.com/recorded webinars, as well as copies of the presentation slides. We've got 2 more webinars before Christmas. I'd just like to say thank you very much to our 2 speakers. To Nick Drake-Knight, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome, John T. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, and I'll give you a call shortly afterwards to pick for you to pick the winning tip. And to Rick McCrossan from Genesis, thank you for joining us as well.
Yep, thanks, John T., and thanks everybody for joining today.
And thank you very much. It's a half term next week, so we're off, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time looking at how to tune up your contact center. So thanks everyone for joining us, and hope you have a very pleasant day. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.